Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with me, Jonathan MS Beers. Yes, another video. I just can't stop producing videos on a daily basis. Whatever goes on in my head has to come out and you guys get to suffer it. But this will be very pleasant, hopefully, because we'll be speaking to the awesome Anton. Anton, I have interviewed before through Pierre, who has followed my channel for a very long time. In fact, I went around Ukraine in the back of the battle bus with Greg, Terry, and Zhenya with Pierre. And Pierre was my kind of my wingman. And Pierre has been working off and on for a charity called Base UA that Anton runs. And I got to meet Anton briefly. I know I've interviewed him before through Pierre to kind of get a sense of what he does. But we're going to basically re-go over that because most of you won't have seen that. It was very early on and it's been a long time since that. So we'll remind ourselves of who Anton is and what he does and get a sense of what his experiences are at the moment, thoughts about the war and all of that. So that's my long rambling introduction. Anton, thanks so much for coming on, my man.
Hey, JP, thanks again. It's a pleasure to be back.
Excellent, excellent. So where are you at the moment? And can you give us a sense of, what you do, maybe even go all the way back to how you got into this, what Base UA is and what the work that you guys do is?
Yeah, so I'm in Kramatorsk right now. It's in the east of Ukraine. It's basically the largest and the most important city in the Donetsk region on its Ukrainian-controlled side. I've been here for most of the time since the beginning of the invasion in 2022. Through the different activities that we started doing here, most importantly evacuations and humanitarian aid delivery, back then just as an informal group of friends and friends of friends and different random kind of associations taking place and bringing people together. We started working here in the East and then quickly realized that this is going to be a long run and founded an organization in summer 2022 and have been active ever since. At the beginning, more in the emergency kind of response areas, as I mentioned, evacuations from the hotspots, delivery of the humanitarian aid, medical deliveries, medical evacuations, and things like that. And as this war continues raging, obviously there are more and more complex issues. For example, the terrible isolation that teenagers and kids suffer in these frontline areas. Kramatorsk, for example, a city where around 80,000 civilians live, and about 5,000 of those are underage kids who haven't been to a physical school for many, many years, some of them for even more than the time that the war has been taking place, because before they had COVID lockdowns. So some of these kids have actually never been to a physical school, and you can imagine what kind of consequences this brings with it. So, for example, at this point, beyond the emergency response, we also have more structured, more long-term and more complicated projects as a cultural, a social hub, a center for teenagers here in Kramatorsk. It's a physical space with a bomb shelter that is basically refurbished, not just to have a place where kids can stay during an air alarm, but actually perform activities there and spend there many hours. We also have an art camp in that line of work for internally displaced kids or kids who have been affected by war. That takes place in the Western Mountains in Karpaty in Ukraine, on Drahobrat. And
so that one, that's a center for kids over in the Carpathian Mountains, is that right? Somewhere over here, where you provide an art therapy center for them so they can get to grips with the experiences they've had at war, etc., etc. So that's a real wide range of things, as well as doing the evacuations and the very sort of dangerous things. I mean, you were in Bakhmut in the early days, I presume, in that kind of area, were you? And also, even recently, I think you've been operating around Pokrovsk, and still actually in Pokrovsk. Is that correct?
Evacuations, after a relatively long time where they were a minor part of our work, just because the front line was quite stable for the whole of 2023. We would do them on and off, but concentrate more on other activities that we have listed. We also have done rebuilding projects, fixing houses on liberated territories and things like that. But since basically summer 24, we are back full time with dedicated teams doing evacuations at this point on a daily basis. And yes, most of the time currently it's Pokrovsk where we are operating. And yeah, we go there every day and evacuate people from the worst kind of parts. Obviously, the southern neighborhoods are densely populated, but also at this point just barraged at all times, and it's becoming more and more difficult, but also essential because there are 7,200 people as of yesterday in Pokrovsk city still.
Wow, so that's incredible. 7,200 people still there. And it was, I remember it's like this with Bakhmut, which is you have the situation whereby the most vulnerable people are the ones that are often left behind last. So the older, mental health issues, physical health issues, have no connections. They have no life outside of that kind of where they've got the house or the apartment or whatever, wherever they live. They have no hope to start a new life elsewhere. So they cling on, I guess, hopefully to these places, or are just unable to leave in for all those other reasons. So that must be quite challenging to get them out. What's the process of how you find out about someone that needs to be evacuated, and talk us through, how you'd go about doing it?
So we distribute flyers on a regular basis, which are very basic and clear. And the most important thing is the number that people can call. And I would say the majority of people that we evacuate, we receive an actual request from them, and that goes through the call center, and it gets registered, and then we just plan ahead. So every evening we just know, okay, tomorrow we have 5, 6, 7 requests. We map them out, we build the logistics, the routes, the the different kiss points in case we have to go into the city several times. We work with our second armored vehicle in the city, but usually transfer the people to more comfortable vehicles once they're outside of the city, so they can travel farther on the more appropriate vehicle. So yeah, requests that we receive through the call center. But then once you're in the city, especially now and increasingly so, especially in the south, you come to pick up someone, and then from the same building there is another neighbor that wants to evacuate, or somebody tells you, I know of a granny that wants to evacuate from that house. So you go there and either register her for the next day, or just offer her the opportunity right away, and then she might already have everything packed and she's ready to go. So now
what would everything packed mean? Because I'd imagine sometimes I remember watching that documentary of the chap who unfortunately died. A British guy died in the Bakhmut area, actually. I forget what the Hell Jumper. It's on BBC iPlayer for those in the UK. It's an absolutely fascinating, very sad, but incredible documentary of what he was doing. But there was these accounts of him or the charity he was working for evacuated people. There's some people would be like, no, I want to bring this and I want to bring that, and then they've got their mental health issues as well. They have these unrealistic expectations of what they're going to put in a small van with a bunch of other people. Do you tell them very clearly what they can bring, and do you have to turn not people away, but turn their stuff away?
We do. I mean, at this point, I guess it's a bit less of a challenge because the numbers of people evacuating daily are still quite small compared to what used to be the first months. When we were evacuating from Lugansk region, Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, we would easily evacuate 50, 60 people every day. And so with that amount of people, it was very difficult because we had to do several runs. It was really long rides, really bad roads. And so it was critical to have as many people fit into the cars as possible. It remains a challenge, but at this point, quite often we actually take way more stuff than officially we ask people to take. So usually it's 2-3 bags maximum, but people end up having maybe 5-6, and if the situation allows, then we try to accommodate. We obviously, it's most of the time it's clearly also not stuff that people really need. It's more the emotional side of things, is that they feel that they're managing to bring at least something, because they obviously feel that they're losing everything and that everything will remain behind. And so if we can, we try to accommodate, not that much for the kind of material side of things, but for the emotional, psychological.
And do they ever try and bring pets as well?
Of course, yes. But we evacuate, that's like an ordinary procedure. We evacuate people with cats and dogs regularly, basically on a daily basis. Hopefully, most of the time they have something already prepared, but sometimes we just have to kind of use, cardboard boxes, or if we know in advance and it's like a bigger animal, then we can also prepare something and bring special boxes and cages and transport the animals. That's not an issue. We do that regularly.
What's the weirdest thing or the most bizarre thing that you've had to take?
So actually we didn't take him after all, because the guy was still waiting on evacuating, but just recently, and we were also in contact with that person, a swan was evacuated, and literally just sitting in the seat with the belt, and because it was kind of the safest way, because trying to immobilize.
Was it a pet swan?
It was living in the backyard, basically. Yeah.
Wow.
So outside, but yeah, just at this home, and the guy obviously really didn't want to leave him there, so it was evacuated. But I heard many crazy stories about different animals. I mean, in terms of things that the kind of are special, that we have evacuated museum items from Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, sorry, and that was quite challenging and interesting, and we've done that actually several times. We also evacuated another museum from Mayak in Slovyansk region at the very beginning, when the Russians were much closer there. So yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, wow. So I remember being at your HQ in Kramatorsk when I was there, although it's not the same place. You've since moved, and it was interesting, walking in and seeing the different notice boards you had up, and then the safety requirements and what you have to take, and then your equipment room. I think it's in my last video I did of my trip to Ukraine. So I think it's my part 3 of 10 days in Ukraine. I'm in there, and all the equipment you guys have got to do the work that you do to keep yourself safe, and to have IFACs, first aid kits and all these things. But also, I guess you have to be really careful to look after the staff you have, because as we know, people who have been involved in these activities end up, as I just mentioned, dying in doing this, and taking maybe unnecessary risks, or just being unlucky, or whatever. So how do you ensure that the people that you are responsible for are kept safe and are being safe themselves?
Yeah, we have very specific, constantly evolving protocols and standard operating procedures, and we just follow them, and we just make sure that everyone is aware that the discipline is really in place, because the longer you do this type of activities, the less you can rely on your kind of emotional feedback, because you obviously start to feel much less influenced by the environment, because you just kind of you adapt to it. So it's very important that these procedures and algorithms are formed on an actual reality and not on your subjective perceptions. And so that's one side of things. And obviously you mentioned the infrastructure, the fact that the vehicles have to be always in good state. They have to be checked every day before departure. Obviously we have spare tires, all the tools. We have big medical bags inside of the vehicles, and so on and so forth. So it's a pretty standard kind of approach for generally high risk or difficult to reach environments that I think are similar across the board, not just for this type of work, but for similar environments. And then on the other hand is constant intel gathering and assessment and monitoring. We are gathering as much information as possible just because we are on the ground, so we observe things by ourselves. We're in constant contact with the police, with the military, with other organizations, with the administrations, with people on the ground, and we constantly assess the risk-benefit ratio, which is what we basically base everything on. So if we feel like people who are there are at bigger risk remaining there rather than trying to evacuate them, then we will do it, and the other way around, obviously we will abort the mission. So because we're not just responsible for a crew member, but also for people who we evacuate. So it's a constant kind of assessment of those things. But at the end, we try to eliminate as much risk as possible, but we also just accept that there is an inherent risk to what we do. And that you cannot eliminate and you cannot prepare for it. You just have to embrace it, and at the end, just kind of to be lucky, to be honest. Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, can you talk me through what happened? I mean, this was obviously where you do all your risk assessments and you work out whether things are worth it or not. But some things you can't control for, some things you don't know, and drones can now travel a lot further than they used to and can do an awful lot more. And you can put drone protection on your vehicles, and you can still end up getting into a bit of a sticky situation. And this is one of yours. I mean, there's your base UA sign there. That is your van, and that one took one hell of a beating from a drone. Can you talk us through what happened, the experience of that? I mean, were you in the vehicle then?
I was in the vehicle, yes.
Yeah. So how did this happen?
So we went to Shevchenko on an evacuation mission. It's just south of Pokrovsk. It's where the front line is basically currently grinding. And yes, exactly. And you see that road going inside of the city. That's the one. Yeah, that's the one we took. And actually the hits, yeah, exactly where you were just shown, that's where the hits were. Yeah, so quite far from Shevchenko, basically at the entrance of, but you see there are two turns. So obviously very tactically, they hit us before the first turn because vehicles have to slow down there. And then once we turned, there is also a relatively short road before you have to turn again, so you can't really speed up. So that's where they hit us the second time. And we were very lucky because we were hit from the back and then from the side, and they didn't hit us from the front. So incredibly, beyond the protection that the armored vehicle provided. Obviously, if this was a regular vehicle, somebody would have died, maybe all of us, but there would have been much worse injuries, and the outcome would have been much worse. But beyond the protection that this vehicle provided, we were also very lucky that the actual vehicle, the tires, the engine, haven't been damaged at all, so we could keep driving, and that's what is essential.
Of course, yeah.
What kept you alive. We went to Shevchenko for an evacuation. We were aware that the situation is becoming worse and worse, but actually in the village itself, rather than the road to the village, because there was a push towards Shevchenko, so Shevchenko was becoming a hotter area. It's a road that we've taken many times because way before, like in the summer when we were driving to Selidovo, for example, we were driving this road because it was the safest road, because it was farther from the front line.
So Selidovo, or Selidovo as I used to call it, but it's obviously Selidovo. That is, goodness me, down. It's probably in the middle now. There it is.
A bit to the right,
right there. Yeah, that's how much the I remember when that was just being taken. Now they've got all of this area. So yeah, so that's how you would get to.
And we were driving that road, and so a road we know very well, an environment that we were observing constantly, so we could also perceive very well the changes and the shifts, and we perceived that it's still possible to go, and the mission itself in Shevchenko, in the village, was successful. We had three elderly women on board. And while we were almost entering Pokrovsk, we got hit by the two drones. That's the type of risk that you just kind of cannot foresee, because there were no hits of that sort on that road, or nowhere even close, So we basically were in the wrong time, in the wrong place. We were the typical incident that other organizations, after it happened, obviously gather as an intel and decide, okay, we probably are not going to use that road anymore. We're probably not going to Shevchenko anymore. It's just that this time we were unlucky to be.
Somebody's got to be the first to work out that this one's no longer viable. Wow. So how did that leave you? Were you driving at the time?
I was navigating, so I was on the right side of the vehicle where actually the hit from the side came, and my colleague, was driving.
So you were sitting in that seat. Oh no, I'm not showing it. You were sitting in that seat there.
Yes, that's what I was
Wow. And that is, it does look like this is armored. I mean, it does look like that is giving you some decent protection, and the window's still there, so that is pretty incredible. How does that affect you psychologically? And going out on that next journey you have to take. Do you just put it behind you and block it out, or were you shaken? Did it make you nervous?
I was surprised actually of how well we both handled it, myself and Philip, both in the situation. I guess the kind of the prep that goes into it and specific algorithms really proved to be effective. And then the aftermath as well. I also thought, I guess because the outcome was relatively benign, nobody died, nobody was seriously injured. I guess also because of that, the aftermath is not really something extraordinary. We just keep working. I can't say that it somehow influenced me that much. On the evening, once we came back home, there was an interesting thing that I realized later, is that I started to have like fever, an actual fever, and I was shaken as a cold. Like the symptoms were absolutely typical of a cold, and I didn't and I thought maybe could be like it's cold now, and people are getting sick around and stuff. So I didn't really pay too much attention to it, and I just took like a paracetamol and it went away. But then just a couple of days later, because we didn't speak about it with my colleague Philip, who was in the car, but it came out that he had exactly the same symptoms.
Wow.
Yeah, so we both really had fever, and we felt like, so I guess it's because of the tension that your body, because we've been like for hours, obviously super concentrated, very much mobilized, and just trying to remain on the top of the situation. And once we arrived at the base, and it was clear that we can now relax, maybe the kind of that process generated those symptoms, but that was the only thing that was clearly the consequence of that. But otherwise, I have to say we were really lucky. The armored vehicle also helped, I think, in terms of our psychological reaction, because it absorbed the impact very well, and the vehicle is very heavy, so it almost didn't move, you know. And because again, if it was just like a normal car, we would have probably capsized, or at least, like, you know, it would have thrown us to the side.
Really, there's that much difference? Yeah. Wow.
Oh yeah. I mean, this bus is like 4 ton. You know, it weighs a lot.
Wow.
Like it's a very heavy vehicle, and it also, because it has this capsule inside, it also isolates the sound very much. Like you actually don't hear much when you're inside of what's happening.
Oh wow.
And so that also absorbed that impact quite well. So the moment it hit, I knew right away 100% that it was an FPV. Like, I didn't hesitate. I was like, oh, what was that? Is it artillery close by or whatever? Like, I guess because of how the armored vehicle absorbed it, it really gave us the space to remain kind of concentrated. And so I knew it was FPV. I knew immediately that the car withheld, so that it really kind of worked. And then when the second hit, I guess it was slightly worse, because I was like, okay, they're really targeting us. And how many are there? You know, is there a third one? Is there a fourth one? Obviously, the car can't, you know, withstand 10 FPVs. So after the second one, I was a bit more nervous, but we were also almost entering Pokrovsk. So I was just talking to the ladies all the time, trying to make sure that they stay calm, and, you know, just talking everyone through what was happening. And my colleague, you know, he was just very concentrated on driving, because obviously the worst thing that can happen, and there is a very high risk of that happening, is an accident after something like that, you know, because you get hit by a drone, you press the accelerator, you start driving too fast, you're panicking, and you do a right move, and that actually becomes a worse situation than it was. So he was very concentrated on driving, and again, we were very lucky that we were hit the way we were hit, because it does have, definitely, the drone on the side had the cumulative load, because it pierced through the armor. Then it went through another layer of armor inside, because it basically pierced through the armor outside on the door. And then inside there is like a capsule, and that capsule is also separated by the door. And then there is another door, not the door, but the wall. So it pierced through, I don't know, like 6 layers of armor with no issues whatsoever.
Wow.
And obviously, if that went through any other trajectory, it basically the way it went, it missed the lady that was injured most, but just by smaller shrapnel that was flying around. It missed her maybe by 30 centimeters. So even what happened, you know, even the impact that we absorbed, and even what came through, we were still very lucky that it went the way it went.
Yeah, because someone was saying that's the strongest part of the vehicle where it hit, like structurally speaking.
Yes.
On the side. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I had shrapnel in my seat, like in the back of my seat and stuff like that. So it could have been much worse. And again, it could have hit us from the front and everything. So we're just very lucky. And then we drove into Pokrovsk, and also immediately, so we were looking for a place to stop, and because we assessed the situation in the vehicle, it was clear that nobody had any critical injuries. Nobody's going to die in the next couple of minutes. So the priority was to drive out to safety, and then stop and look for a place where to assess everyone and give first aid. And as we entered the city, we saw an ambulance just there, which is a very rare sight in Pokrovsk.
Right.
And it was an ambulance that didn't have anyone inside, no patients. They were, I guess, just waiting, or maybe going back from a call. And so we just stopped there, and then all together we very quickly assessed the lady and gave her first assistance, and off she went. And in 25 minutes she was at the hospital. And after 1 week, I think she was released from the hospital. So nobody was heavily injured.
That's amazing. And what kind of electronic equipment do you have on board? Do you have any drone detection or drone anti-drone interference, jamming electronic devices on board? Is that something you carry?
We have different devices to analyze the frequencies and to track drones. To be honest, like in this case, we had two on board and none of them worked because the range of frequencies that FPVs use now are so broad that it's virtually impossible to monitor all of them. Plus, there is obviously more and more of optical fiber drones, especially on the Russian side. And in Pokrovsk, currently, we observe them on a daily basis.
Wow.
So what we have, which is so these small frequency analyzers, they show us, oh, there is a DJI Mavic, or there is an FPV flying somewhere relatively far, but if it doesn't really, the way you would imagine it work, it doesn't really work. Like theoretically, it should be able to register a drone, start tracking it. If it starts moving closer to you, it starts beeping faster and it registers, and you can really understand, okay, that this drone is approaching me. But we have never experienced that in all of the time that we have used it, just because I think the technology is really imperfect. What we do have as well is we have a video signal interceptor. So instead of analyzing the frequencies that are used to control the drones, yes, we have a possibility of intercepting the signal that sends the video that the pilot sees. Again, it's just an additional tool to gather information, better.
I mean, that's incredible. So this is, I presume, you've hacked into, if you like, the video feed of an FPV drone that's somewhere near here.
That's exactly what it does. Yeah. You basically see what the drone sees. Yeah.
And if you see your car, you crap yourself and step on it, right?
Yeah, or you step out of the car and take cover. Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah, but again, right. We don't know how many drones it manages to intercept. So because we don't actually have the whole data, we cannot say that this thing makes us safer. It's an additional tool, but it can potentially intercept 9 of 10 drones, but the 10th one that actually is coming to hit you is either optical fiber or on a frequency that this interceptor is not seeing, or for whatever reason it's weaker, so it remains on another frequency that is stronger, and you won't see the actual drone than the one that you really wanted to see. So it's good to have it because obviously on a daily basis you go into the city and you're like every 30 seconds is beeping and it's showing you a new drone. And on the other day, you're driving around and there's nothing coming up, and you understand, okay, this is a heavy day. Like, there's a lot of traffic, lots of drones, probably there's fighting going on. On the other day, you don't see that many, then there's a higher chance that the weather is bad, or for whatever other reason they're not.
Or they're using fiber optic drones, because of course that's not going to pick up those. And as you said, they're becoming more and more of a problem. The Russians have had a head start with fiber optics, and it's definitely a real challenge because they can do all sorts. It's not just that you can't interfere with them, but actually you can fly them in wooded areas more easily. I guess they can fly them lower more easily. I think you can fly them into buildings technically, and they won't lose that connection to the operator. So fiber optic drones are a real pain in the ass.
Absolutely. Yeah. Becoming a huge issue, and not clear what to do about it, to be honest. They are not as fast. They can't carry as much load. They're more expensive. So I doubt that they will, take over completely, but they will be just like a standard tool that we will just see everywhere, and whenever and wherever it's effective, it will be used.
Yeah, goodness. So how have you seen the war develop in terms of, I guess what you're doing now is no different to what you were doing, say, in, Lysychansk or whatever. You're doing the same sort of things. You're also doing those rehabilitation projects and helping out the children, really importantly in Kramatorsk and elsewhere. Have you seen what's changed over the course of the war for you, for the experience of the people that work with you? Are people's spirits still high? I mean, this is almost 3 years now, and it must be really challenging, I would have thought, but I don't want to answer for you. Well, give me some thoughts on the changing war for you, or is it pretty much it's actually exactly the same?
No, not at all. Not at all. There's a huge fatigue, of course, and that obviously it's kind of a make it or break it moment currently. That's exactly what Russians hope for, is that we just kind of give up because it's too much. Because obviously the country is massively damaged for decades and decades to come, and it's just difficult to even start talking about the toll and the price that this country has paid to be able to continue resisting. Everything changed, to be honest. The situation is very different. There's been this humanitarian sector. You don't really have volunteers anymore. It all became much more institutionalized and much more structured, which is a good thing. It has to happen, but it changes a lot of dynamics. There's a huge amount, the first wave of people who were helping were people who also had their lives disrupted. They also left cities and were like trying to understand what's happening and trying to give a hand here and there. And it was all very spontaneous, very organic. But
Are you talking predominantly about Ukrainians here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I guess also internationals. Obviously, there was a bigger flow of just internationals coming and also looking for random opportunities and finding them. Now it's much more difficult, as an international to come and try to do impactful, effective work is much more difficult these days, because a lot of it is also built on language, but also because most of it is much more structured and institutionalized. But so many of those people who were doing this work at the beginning, they came back to their regular lives because those also restarted or they came back, to their families, to their cities. They reopened their businesses or went back to work or whatever. So they now just don't have the physical space. We have seen that in our own organization with quite a few members. Obviously, a lot of people also in our organization have joined the army. That's the second thing that happened to many people who were starting as volunteers at the beginning. They quite sooner or later, most of those feel that kind of dealing with the consequences is not enough. You need to actually do something very active to stop the war and fighting or supporting the military in any way you can. It seems like the best way to use your time and resources. So many have joined the army.
Did you have a guy called Dima working for you?
Yeah, he's one of those who joined the army.
Yeah, because we were going to raise a NAFO truck for him, but then he was involved in an incident with an exploding drone in his unit down near Vuhledar, that kind of area, and unfortunately that kind of fell through, and he was getting rehabilitation back in Kiev. But so that's one example of someone who was working with you and then joined the army. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and we have several guys who are like that. So yeah, I mean there is a very kind of low morale, to be honest. It's not like people are willing to give up or they don't want to continue fighting, but it's just that it became much harder to be like positively motivated, and everyone is completely burned out in any sector, from the military to the humanitarian sector. Everyone is just kind of surviving day by day, and both understands that there's no alternatives. You just have to keep at it, but also everyone is just completely exhausted, and it's just very hard, and that makes everything just more difficult, obviously. Yeah, I feel like in general there is a bit more of this gap as well between the frontline areas and cities further away. Not necessarily that people in those cities are, you know, like living their lives and pretending that nothing is happening. It's just that they have a different war that they also have to endure. You know, businesses struggling to find workforce, families obviously being separated, lots of people displaced. So that generates specific long-term social issues, and all of that is becoming more and more prominent. So the priorities of people, I think, are more fragmented than they used to be at the beginning, where there is obviously this major unity and just this sense that everyone is ready to mobilize and just give everything to save the country.
3 years is a long time to be operating at those kind of high stress levels, and the anxiety and everything. I mean, it's just exhausting, mentally and physically exhausting, and in a way that very few of us that are not anything to do with Ukraine, as in all war zones or anything like that, will just have no idea about. So yeah, absolutely, and it's connected to the war as well. Ukraine is being invaded by much larger country, and it's very challenging for Ukraine to be able to get back the initiative on the front line and to start taking back their territory militarily. That's a really tall order when you've got much smaller army, and you need like 200,000 extra people to kind of start doing things like that. It's just not going to happen. And of course that plays, you know, without having, you know, we go back, I guess, to 2022, wasn't it? All the way back to 2022 when you had a Kharkiv counteroffensive and the Kherson, and that lifted everyone's spirits. You're like, yes, we can do this, and there's that positivity. And then since then, it's just been really difficult. And then when you look at politically what's going on, in fact, okay, so that's something to ask. So how do you feel when you see nations supporting you or not supporting you? How do you feel about the present situation with political support or not from abroad? What do you feel about the change of presidency in the United States?
I don't know, I almost try not to think about it, because I mean, obviously the man that is now going to be the next president of the United States just says crazier and crazier things every day, and it's both kind of impossible to pretend that this doesn't matter, but also very difficult to believe that all of that is serious. So I'm just baffled, and to be honest, I kind of retracted to this very small reality of our activities, because this is something I can actually influence, and I can
really good point.
Really, you know, see the impact that we're generating, seeing the change that our work brings, and that kind of keeps us going. Because looking at this big picture, I guess, you know, all seems quite senseless and hopeless.
Well, yeah, but that's a really strong psychological lesson. So in terms of mental well-being, it's often thought, you know, what you have control over is what you need to be what you need to be concentrating on, because things you can't control, you can't do anything about. So don't worry about them. It's like there's an old Confucius, old Chinese proverb, which is like, if there's nothing you can do about it, don't get angry about it. And if there is something you can do about it, don't get angry about it, because you can go and do, you know, so either do something or don't get angry about it. But there's no point it's easy for me to say, I sit here and rant every day and I get super bloody angry about crazy stuff going on in the world, but I can't particularly affect that in an immediate way. And so it's probably no use doing that, but it's a way that I vent, I suppose. But yeah, for you, I really, that makes an awful lot of sense, which is if I just keep to my little world here and know that I'm doing the best I can and everything I can to help in this war, and I'm seeing the tangible benefits of what I'm doing and the smiles on people's faces, or the thanks that I get or whatever, and sometimes probably not smiles and no thanks. Sometimes maybe you're taken for granted, but you know inside that you've done the right thing for these people. I guess that keeps you going.
That's what, yeah, and that's what I also say to all my colleagues and friends, you know, that are just kind of being depressed and really with low morale, concentrating maybe on the bad things that are now, you know, are heard more and more often on TV as well, about corruption here and or whatever bad commanders structures there. But I remind myself, and as maybe pathetic that sounds, but that's the truth, that I always think about the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who have given everything and who are still fighting at the front line, and hundreds of thousands that will come and continue what needs to be done. And that's kind of the environment and the approach that I want to associate myself with. And so yeah, I think we're still at it. There's still very good chances of continuing this for as long as it's needed, but clearly also outside of Ukraine, there is this danger of countries trying to push us towards something that will not really be a ceasefire, will not be a sustainable solution, but just will be a short break before the next war, which will be much worse than this one. And I would like to avoid that. I don't think that any type of ceasefires or any type of stagnations or status quo is beneficial to us, because the moment there is a ceasefire, Russia will every day continue to basically amass as many resources and human resources as possible. They already have transformed their war into a war economy. Potentially, once some sanctions will be lifted, that will only improve their situation in building those capacities, while we will have to suddenly deal with all these super complicated, very deep social, political issues in the midst of a country that is completely destroyed and needs an incredible amount of resources and also the willingness of people to sacrifice and to understand that it will take really decades, and we will all have to go out of our comfort zones, and we will have to reintegrate millions of people who are internally displaced. We will have to reintegrate occupied territories, previously occupied territories, and so on and so forth. So I am very much afraid that we will kind of drown in that swamp while Russia is just building more and more power, and then in a couple of years they will just annihilate us.
Yeah, and this is it's worth emphasizing that there is a reason that Zelensky keeps talking about security guarantees like NATO accession or something that's equivalent to that, because there is it has to be really emphasized. As Anton just said, if you have a ceasefire and nothing else in place, you are giving Russia permission to restock, rearm, regenerate, and go again. Ceasefire is absolutely pointless. Zelensky will not accept a ceasefire unless alongside it you get an absolute steel guarantee of security. So something like being a member of NATO, so that Russia can't attack again, because if they attack again, they're attacking NATO, or some kind of joint expedition force agreement between Britain, Germany, Poland, Nordic states, Baltic states, to say we've got forces there. If you attack, that is an attack on all of these forces, because without that, ceasefire is pointless, and therefore they won't go and negotiate. So that is why he keeps saying like NATO accession is the number one thing that we need. And you understand it. Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. So 2 questions for you. Because there's a big difference here. How would you hope, how can you foresee this ending as best as possible? What's the best possible outcome? Bearing in mind that's kind of realistically possible. And then what do you think is the most likely outcome at the moment from your point of view?
I think the best outcome is, as you mentioned, some really specific security guarantees. And to be honest, I don't see any other guarantees but not NATO at this point. Considering how everything is is working, and how obviously also with the situation in the Middle East and other places, how the whole notion of international law has been completely undermined. I think it will be very difficult to convince Russia and Ukraine that any other type of agreement will be actually good enough. Basically, NATO agreement for those territories that currently don't have any front lines, and then freezing the current front line, having international peacekeeping soldiers on the ground, and making sure, again, with what mandate, I don't know. We see what peacekeeping missions can do in places where they've been for decades, and they clearly have demonstrated to be completely ineffective once fighting actually starts. We've seen that in Lebanon, obviously, now, but also in other places. So again, that has to be not just on paper, but in action. Like, we need a force that will separate the two armies and will prevent any type of possibilities of contact. And then decades of political work, obviously. I don't see any scenarios where we can take back the whole territory and that is internationally recognized anytime soon. But I think that should be our raison d'etre for the next decades. Like, we cannot take it militarily, but we have to do everything we can to take it back, and that should be our priority, really number one, as long as that didn't happen.
100%, because I mean, anything that isn't that. So realistically, militarily, you're not going to be able to take that territory back, because it just requires hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people to do that. The only way that might happen is if you had a Russia collapsing completely, and that would, I've said this before, the only way that happens is an economic collapse, alongside a kind of regime collapse or something like that, and then you might get the withdrawal of the army and a complete change. But how likely that is, I don't know. So if it's a military thing, you're unlikely to get that territory back, which means that already Russia they've not won, because they've taken it's been incredibly costly for Russia in all sorts of different ways. But it's a kind of like, it justifies them doing invasions, and it's terrible. It's terrible that we've got to this place where someone can invade another country, take their land, and the rest of the world can't do enough to stop that happening, to reverse that. Like, what is that telling us? What kind of, like, you're bringing up your children and you say, yeah, we live in a world where it's okay to just go around to people's houses and help yourself to their rooms. You just go and squat in their rooms. That's fine. No, that's not the world we live in. We respect each other's property. So how is it that we are allowing Russia to do what they're doing, and we are powerless as an international community to stop them invading another country? But that's where we've got to. So you're absolutely right. So then it has to be, otherwise the rules-based order falls apart. It has to be that we spend, all of us together, all of the allies of Ukraine, spend political time and effort constantly trying to get that land back politically somehow. But it's just so unfair. That's why I'm still doing what I'm doing 3 years later, because this is so bloody unfair. Sorry, that's me ranting.
I totally agree. I think realistically, I really don't know what's going to happen. Like, there's so many, I highly doubt that Russia is going to collapse anytime soon. I think on one hand, yes, empires have collapsed very quickly when nobody expected. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think they will survive this very well. And we as a country have gone through this several times in the last several hundreds of years, and every time it was this feeling of an opportunity of finally liberating ourselves. But then long-term conflicts just become unsustainable for smaller actors against bigger actors, with obviously that access to resources and those types of support that Russia obviously receives from Iran and North Korea and China and else. So I don't know. I just hope that we will not get a ceasefire that will basically just be a break and a pause. So hopefully the technological transformations that are taking place will potentially give us an opportunity to prolong the conflict at less human cost, and generally at less cost to us, with more and more, obviously, of these unmanned, not just aerial, but also water-based and land-based, basically unmanned vehicles that can do all sorts of things are becoming a reality, not just an idea, but we're actually seeing them on the battlefield. So I really don't know what is actually going to happen, because we obviously have also seen that every time it seems like there is a possibility of predicting something, it actually turns out to be very different, because there's so many different elements and so many different things around the world as well that are playing into this. That's why I think even if it's clearly by far not the worst in terms of human suffering, even right now, there are places where things are much more horrendous on a daily basis. But the scale of this war and the fact that so many different interests and so many outcomes will influence so many things that we rely upon, that what makes this conflict really worldwide important, I think. And that's why it's important that we continue, obviously, also given its the necessary attention to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to base UA, I have to say, here's a picture of Pierre with his kit on, doing. So I'm going to be meeting up with Pierre at some point over the next near distant future, because I'll be delivering some trucks out to Ukraine, and it would be wonderful. Actually, I don't know if are you ever in Kyiv at all?
Yeah, sometimes, but definitely let me know when you're coming out. And
yeah, I'll reach out, because we're hoping to do a panel. I know Jonathan Fink has a channel called Silicon Curtain. He's driving one of the trucks, and he's hoping to have a panel event maybe in Kyiv and one in Lviv. Nice. So if we do have one in Kyiv and you're around, and I'm sure it'll be great to have you there and your views and experiences. But yeah, so is it would you like people to donate to your charity at all, to your to base UA? Is that if I direct people to your website, baseua.org, I presume that is open for business, so to speak?
Very much so. And yeah, we remain a relatively small kind of grassroots initiative, so direct donations are not just a nice to have, but an existential resource for us. So yeah, of course, and anyone who wants to support our work, the money really goes into the work. We're very grateful for any support.
And you can see all the projects they do, and they have all the pictures alongside that. I've seen the work they do, I've been to the headquarters and seen you go out and come in and go about your daily dealings and whatnot. All these projects: emergency response, mobile clinic, kids and teens, art camp, rebase and rebuild. Fantastic stuff by the looks of it. When I was out there, we were going to try and meet up with you guys with Greg and Zhenya, and you'd gone out to Seversk to a hospital that was it was pretty hairy there. And because we changed our schedule to go and try and meet you to see if you could connect with Greg Terry and Zhenya to do some working together as humanitarian organizations or whatnot. It was a bit of a last minute thing. We didn't have the paperwork, and we couldn't get through one of the block posts to get to Seversk. And it was really frustrating, because we were like halfway there, and then we had to turn around and come back, because obviously, you can't just drive around to any of these places willy-nilly. You have to have the right paperwork to do so. But anyway, so you are all over the shop. You've been Seversk, and as you say, Lysychansk, Sloviansk, Bakhmut, Pokrovsk, and yeah, is that where you are doing most of your work on a daily basis at the moment? You yourself personally, Pokrovsk?
Yeah, I mean, we have the Center for Teenagers here in Kramatorsk, which is open every day, and we are also Rebase is a project where we fundraise actually mostly private donations and relocate families with kids frontline areas. We're going to relocate a few families in the coming weeks. So these last few days, we're actually going and visiting them and getting to know them and answering their questions. The kind of hotspot evacuations currently are taking place in Pokrovsk 99% of the time, plus a few villages like Rodinske or Dachne, so villages around Pokrovsk. But Pokrovsk is the hottest spot right now, and spot where, because like Toretsk, for example, is also extremely intense, but there are no more villages there, and Toretsk itself has not evacuated completely. Whoever wanted to leave and could leave has. So Pokrovsk is so important.
You're breaking up really badly there, but just to sort of translate what you're saying, so 99% of the evacuations and the stuff that you're doing at the moment is Pokrovsk because that's really hot, but Toretsk has been, but now it's mainly taken over Toretsk by the Russians, and so there's not so much to do around there. Hopefully that's given your internet a chance to reconnect a bit there. But yeah, and then rebase. What you're saying is rebase as part of what you do is creating a place for displaced IDPs, internally displaced people. I take it to go and live somewhere. Is that what that's about?
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. Basically, with eBase, we fundraise. It's just private donation, and we buy houses in central regions of Ukraine and relocate families with children to these new houses with land. We relocate them also with like their furniture and all the tools. So the idea is to give them as good of a chance to be self-sufficient and reintegrate as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, look, if people can help out Base UA as much as possible, that would be really, really great. And the link is in the description below. I just before we sort of meander towards the end, and give you a chance to say anything else you think is important to talk about. Just a few thanks to people supporting the channel, and that will also help me to get those trucks out to Ukraine. So that's very much appreciated. All the fuel, accommodation, and whatnot to get out there. Michael Vujar, thank you for gifting your memberships. The memberships there, really appreciate Michael. Thank you, matey. BME, another little something, Jonathan, for another cuppa on your trip. Thank you, BME, always a strong supporter. Richard Bennett, tireless supporter of Ukraine and this channel. Thank you, Richard, gifting those memberships. BTC Bandit, thanks, guys, for all your efforts. And Stephen Bendal towards the trip as well, some petrol money for your trip. Hope you see the beauty of Kiev this time. I did see it last time, but only too briefly, and I can't wait to see it again. However, why do I keep going to Ukraine in the middle of winter? It would be nice to see Ukraine in the summertime one day. But yeah, Kevin Force, thank you. Really generous with the ATP Geopolitics memberships for people to have. Simon Keep, let's get those trucks out there. Absolutely, Simon. Thank you. That will help that happen. It's going to be a long drive. Mr. Lion Dust, super sticker. Thank you very much. Paul Gilbert, petrol money for the team. Thank you. Definitely needed. So thank you that. And Finnish guy, really kind of you as well. Just a couple of nice things here. Thank you, Lisa, because I said, I get angry. I don't have much power in doing anything. Sorry, that was no Vigor. Sorry, Greg Skerritt said, you say what you do can't influence things, JP. I disagree. You diligently report the things that mainstream media are afraid of and help keep us informed with the things that need recording. Thank you. Glad that you think that is the case. And thanks to Benny Pye, who helps out and will be joining me driving those trucks out there. JP's message goes quite far, I think, often indirectly via the community to those who wouldn't get the message otherwise. I'd like to think that. I don't know if that's the case. Anton was saying about his outlook. Lisa said, what a fantastic outlook. We can be overwhelmed with the political stuff, but actually on the ground, Anton and friends are making a huge difference. And Vigo adds to that, concentrate on the next positive thing you can do for others. No use in worrying over external happenings you cannot influence. The higher the pressure, the narrower the tunnel vision. Well said there, Vigo, as well. So, Anton, as we draw to a close, is there anything that you would like to talk about that we haven't discussed? And that can be anything to do with anything, things that we haven't said.
No, it was really nice to kind of touch on all of these points. Obviously, also showing how things have changed in the last few years. So, just really cool that you have invited me. Thank you, JP. Thank you for everything you do. I think that is really difficult to overestimate how important this support is. Like, really, Ukrainians are very grateful, and they really feel the support from abroad, and that actually gives us a lot of motivation. You know, that I also still have in the other room people here from Canada, people from the US, obviously Pierre from the UK, yourself. So people who could be far away and just drinking Negronis and, you know, kind of continuing their own life without bothering that much. The fact that all those people really making not just an effort, but actually pay like an economical price and the kind of comfort of life thing, and come here regularly and sometimes for longer periods and support, that is incredibly appreciated and very important. So I wanted to thank them and thank everyone who does that, and just really ask you to keep at it, because it does play a role.
Yeah, and do you know what? There is something incredibly important that you've said there. That the volunteers, and let's bring up this image here. So, you know, volunteers who have gone. Okay, you are not Ukrainian volunteers who are putting their lives on hold and helping out, and absolutely incredible. But there's also something. You can say that there's an existential need for people for Ukraine to do that, right? The country ceases to exist if you don't all pull together. I take my hat off as much to people who come from abroad who put their own lives, like you said, on hold, and at a financial cost to them quite often, to then go and help out in Ukraine voluntarily, because there is that calling, there's that moral obligation they feel to go and do that. And you know, Pierre is one of those people, and you have seen many, I'm sure, come and go, and many who have come and stayed as well. And I just want to say hats off to them, that you know, all incredible people, yourself included.
Indeed.
So just a last thank you actually to Margaret de Velden, who is always amazing. Thank you, Anton. Just tried to donate, but it didn't process for some reason. This will work too. I'll pass that on, Margaret, to Anton, and see if I can get it working myself through their through the channel.
PayPal is the easiest option for abroad. They all work, so if something doesn't come through, it's usually your bank, because donating to Ukraine sometimes is a bit complicated. But yeah, PayPal always comes through. So for those who have PayPal, I guess it's the easiest. The monobank one is nice because you can use a credit or a debit card, but some banks won't allow that unless you kind of call them and ask them to habilitate that and stuff. So PayPal, I think, is the easiest.
Absolutely. And Robert Lockhart, for you to bring milk with you this time, do you know what, Robert? I've thought about this. My call sign when I was in Ukraine last time was oat milk, because because of my MS, my multiple sclerosis, I try and stay away from dairy for complicated reasons. But so I was trying to get oat milk and soy milk everywhere. Now I'm going to be taking a couple of soy milks with me to make sure that I can drink my tea, because, you know, guys, you know I like my tea. And in the middle of Ukraine, I'm still going to be getting my English breakfast tea at the gas stations and having my oat milk, having my soy milk with it. So it will happen. In fact, I've got a photo, because volunteers sometimes are going to be the sorts of people that are going to have oat milk. Turns out that Kramatorsk was one of the first place I found some oat milk, and I took a picture of it. I was like, yes, I'm in heaven. I can have a proper cup of tea now. So thank you to the Kramatorsk HQ for that. Look, Anton, all the very best to what you do. Stay safe, my man. And anytime you want to come on and talk about your experiences, or just try and get people interested in Base UA and helping to support the great charity that you are so deeply involved in, please just shoot me a message. You know, if you ever want to come on and say, yeah, I'm free this week, if you fancy a chat, we can always shoot the breeze and talk about any aspect of the war that I'm sure people will be interested in. So don't be afraid to do that, my man.
Thank you, GP. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries at all, man. Well, look, take care. I will see you soon. Stay on the line. And thank you so much to the very kind people. Graham Baker, incredibly generous super sticker there from you, from all the way from Australia. Don't make me do my Australian accent again. I will embarrass myself. But no, thank you, guys. I'm famous for it. I think it's brilliant. It's 50-50 in the comments. Some people think it's great. Some people think it's the worst thing they've ever heard. But there you go. And what else do I want to say? Yeah, please go to Base UA and donate to their worthy cause, and give the guys there, the people there, a good boost. That would be wonderful if you can. The link is in the description below. In the meantime, take care, team, and thank you, Anton, staying online. Really appreciate you. Any last words to Anton?
Yeah, just thank you again. Thank everyone for listening. Appreciate it. Stay safe.
Awesome stuff.